Welcome to this week's assembly. Have you put any of your Christmas decorations up? Have you got a tree up yet? About this time of the year, I take my tree and my Christmas decorations down from the loft, which is probably what a lot of families do. And as I do that, and as I start putting my decorations up, I'm always reminded of a true story about the gift that one little girl gave to another. It always reminds me of the true spirit of Christmas, which is giving and receiving from the heart. As I tell you this story, I'd like you to think about how the story illustrates the different values that you have at your school. There may be one or two examples of the opposites of your values, things that you wouldn't like to see in your school, but maybe you could discuss it afterwards. This is a story called The Best Gift, and it's about a little girl that went to a school in a village, a bit like your school. Her name was Ruby. She'd just gone into year 6 at the beginning of September. She had lots of friends, and she got on well with most of the children in her class. One day in the middle of September, a new girl started. She stood by the teacher's desk on her first morning. The teacher, Miss Walker, introduced her as Amina. And Amina came from a country called Syria. You might have heard of that. Amina didn't speak very good English because she hadn't been in Britain very long. Ruby later found out that Amina, her mum and her baby brother had to escape from Syria because there was a war going on. And they came to Britain where they hoped to be safe. Miss Walker sat Amina at the front of the class, so all that Ruby could see was the back of her dark headscarf that she wore. Ruby hoped she would get to know Amina at break time, but it wasn't as easy as as Ruby hoped, because Amina was very shy and didn't speak very much English, and it was hard to get to know her. Ruby did try, but when a game of football started in the playground, Ruby just had to join in because she was a massive football fan. Every day, Ruby spent a little bit of time with Amina at break or lunch before rushing off to play football with her friends. Unfortunately, the teasing and the whispering gradually started. A couple of children in year 6 began to say mean things about Amina. They were the ones who got told off by teachers in the past for being mean. There were only 2 of them, but the other children were scared of standing up to them in case they got picked on. It was easier to say nothing and to stay away a little bit from Amina. Ruby tried to smile at her and say a few words to her when the others weren't around, but that was all. It was a cold winter that year. It must have been strange for Amina, who came from Aleppo in Syria, which is a very hot city. Ruby noticed that Amina's coat wasn't a very warm one, and her shoes weren't suitable for the rain. As Christmas drew near, decorations began to go up, sparkling Christmas lights on fir trees, Christmas cards, silver bells, jolly Santas, and wooden reindeer. Amina's family didn't normally celebrate Christmas, but her eyes sparkled when she saw all the decorations. She was living in a new country and wanted to join in with the celebrations. Ruby's class at school had a secret Santa. That's where all the names of the children were put into a hat and it was passed around, and the children picked a name out, and the name that they picked was the child that they were going to buy a Christmas present for, which would be shared out at the Christmas party. The hat went round, it came to Amina's turn. She picked a name. One of the bullies sneakily looked and said, "Ha ha! Amina's got Ruby's name. Well, Ruby's not going to get much of a present." People snickered. Ruby felt sorry for Amina, but she also felt a bit sorry for herself because she realised that she wouldn't get much of a present because Amina's family hardly had enough money for food, let alone buy Christmas presents. The day of the Christmas party arrived. They played games and they had party food, and then presents were handed round, the moment that Ruby had been dreading. Everyone was watching everyone else open presents. Ruby wanted to protect Amina, who was sitting on her own, her big brown eyes sparkling. It was Ruby's turn to open the present. Slowly, she unwrapped the paper. Inside was a little blue and white bag which looked like it had been made with wool. It had blue and white squares, and in each square there was a pattern that looked like a leaf in red and black and white. And the handle was made of, it looked like garden twine that you might use in your garden. It wasn't the kind of bag that Ruby would have liked to buy when she went on one of her shopping trips with her mum. Some of the children were sniggering. Ruby put the bag back in the wrapping paper, looked at Amina and smiled and said, "Thank you, Amina." Amina smiled and said, "You are welcome." When Ruby got home, she left the bag on the side of the kitchen table and actually forgot about it. She had a wonderful Christmas. Amina and Ruby went back to school after Christmas, but during that first term, end of January, beginning of February, Amina and her small family moved away to a different part of England. Ruby sometimes wondered how Amina was getting on, but not very often. The following Christmas, Ruby had almost forgotten about Amina, but when she helped her mum and dad put the Christmas decorations up, she discovered Amina's little blue and white bag in the box where the tree decorations were kept. Her mum and dad and Ruby looked at it, and her mum explained it had been hand-stitched. It must have taken hours of work with the help of Amina's mum. Ruby's dad said that it was a traditional Syrian tapestry bag. Amina must have taken a lot of time making it. Ruby thought about Amina, and she opened the bag for the very first time. Inside there was a note that Ruby had never read. She opened it. It said, "To my best friend, from Amina." How Ruby had wished she'd had the courage to spend more time with Amina and helped her, and that they'd become the best friends, the kind of friends that you stay together forever. It wasn't how much that the present had cost, or what it was really, but the thought that was behind it and the love and care that went into its making. It was then that Ruby learned that Amina had given her the best gift. Now that story teaches us that it was Amina that gave Ruby the best gift. And at Christmas we give gifts, don't we, to our family, our friends, sometimes people we don't even know. Some of you might have donated to the Shoebox Appeal, giving children gifts from families who can't really afford them. We send gifts at Christmas to remember that God gave his best gift to us at Christmas, his only son, Jesus. Jesus made the big journey from heaven to earth so that we could know God, to know what God is like, and so that we could become his friends. Now I've got a final prayer to finish with, and don't forget you can discuss what values you think that story shows afterwards or in your classes at some point. I'm going to say a prayer. If you like the prayer, you agree with it and want to make it your prayer, you can say Amen with me at the end. Dear God, thank you for loving the whole world enough to send your greatest gift, your Son, that we remember at Christmas. Thank you that Christmas can be a time for giving. Thank you for all the people in our lives that give to us, our parents, for our families, doctors, teachers, friends, foster carers, and many others. Help us to remember to give gifts to others. Help us to remember that our gifts of love, care, and time are all special, They might not cost money, but they're important things to give. Thank you for everything that you give to us. Amen. Amen. I hope to see you soon. Bye.